On May 16, 1992, Mexican singer-songwriter Chileno Sanchez gave one of his best performances to date. He performed many of his popular songs before ending the concert in spectacular Poe fashion. The fans loved every second of it. Little did they know at the time this was going to be the last time they would ever see him perform. And it all tied back to the origin of Chileno's music. You see, Chileno was born in 1960 in a very poor farming region in Sinaloa, Mexico. Even worse than poverty, Chileno's village was marked by rampant inequality, where a few rich and powerful men had the power to do whatever they wanted. Unfortunately, Chileno experienced this inequality firsthand when a local thug named El Chapo Perez assaulted one of his sisters. However, Chileno wasn't going to let that slide. When he was just 15 years old, he spotted El Chapo at a party, and without a second thought, Chileno went up to El Chapo, drew his gun, and killed him at point-blank range. But since El Chapo was a well-connected man, killing him forced Chileno to flee to Tijuana before crossing the border into the U.S. after establishing a foothold in America. Chileno went into business with his brother in Mexico as smuggling Mexicans into the U.S. However, this operation came to an end in 1984 when his brother was killed in a hotel in Tijuana. This inspired Chileno to write a song commemorating his brother. But he did so in the most unconventional way. The song was written in a traditional Mexican style called Cito. For the lyrics, Chileno spoke openly about him and his brother's life, not shying away from the topics of drugs and violence. During this time, he himself ended up in prison in Tijuana there. Other inmates loved his unique style of music, causing it to spread across the Mexican underworld. By the time he got out, it also gained a new name called Narco-Cito. After getting out of prison, Chileno kept working on his music and quickly became one of the biggest stars of his era. By 1991, he was selling out arenas for his tour. However, given the genre of his music, he never managed to escape the violence he once came from. During one of his concerts in January of 1992, someone ran onto the stage with a gun. Instead of running to safety, Chileno decided to draw his own gun and engage in a shootout. This resulted in the death of the assailant as well as 10 people in the crowd getting injured. Chileno also got shot but managed to survive. However, his luck was about to run out. About 5 months later, Chileno performed in Quilon, Mexico, delivering what would later be remembered as one of his best performances. And as we mentioned earlier, also his last during the concert. Someone came up to him and handed him a mysterious note in the footage from that concert. We can clearly see Chileno read the note, become visibly shaken by it, begin sweating and stare into the crowd for a very long time before resuming the performance. Near the end of this concert, Chileno made sure to properly say goodbye to everyone, including his friends and fans. Shortly after the concert ended, a Chileno was kidnapped and executed with a bullet to the back of his head. The note he received on stage essentially said something along the lines of, "We're going to kill you." After this performance, Chileno knew the threat was real, and that this performance we see in the video would be his last one. Unfortunately, the identities of the killers were never uncovered, and it's unlikely they ever will be in the future. On November 18, 2011 at 4:35 a.m., Sydney Fire and Rescue Services responded to an automated fire alarm at the Quaker nursing home. The fire was nothing short of a complete tragedy as things started calming down. News outlets conducted interviews of the people involved. This included Roger Dean, a nurse who was on duty at the nursing home when the fire erupted. By the time responders arrived at the scene, the fire had already engulfed a large portion of the building. According to later reports, the fire burned so intensely that even with full protective gear, some firefighters struggled to get close to the flames. What made this already dire situation even worse was that the burning ward housed bedridden dementia patients who were completely unable to escape on their own. Outside, rescue workers could hear the desperate cries for help, but were powerless to act because of the extreme heat. Despite these difficulties, they managed to get over 100 residents to safety. Among those trying to help, however, was Roger Dean, who rushed to secure vital medication records before firefighters stopped him from going back into the flames. This man was hiding a disturbing secret beneath the surface. As it turns out, Roger was the one who started the fire in the first place. It all started with him stealing prescription medication from the nursing home by the hundreds just the day before the fire security cameras caught him accessing the medication closet 36 different times during his shift to steal pills and capsules. However, his luck ran out when other staff members at the nursing home noticed the missing medication and reported it to the police. At this point, Roger knew it was only a matter of time before he got caught. so he came up with a horrible idea to start a fire and steal the medication records during the chaos. And while he managed to execute this plan successfully, the fire also resulted in 11 elderly residents losing their lives to the flames. After he was arrested, Roger came up with the most bizarre excuse to explain his actions. In actuality, there was no Satan or demon telling him to start the fire in the nursing home. He was just a prescription meds junkie who committed a horrendous crime while trying to cover his tracks later investigation. Even uncovered footage of him admiring his handiwork on the morning of the fire, the seemingly innocent video of him being interviewed now, carries a much more disturbing tone. He stood trial in the Supreme Court in May 2013 and was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole for 11 counts of. On December 29, 1986, NBC 7 San Diego aired a segment on highway safety offering tips on what to do in case your car breaks down. If your car should become disabled, the rule of thumb is stay inside. There are signs you can get to put on the back window to summon for help. If strangers should offer assistance, tell them to call police or the CHP. Just stay in the vehicle, lock all the doors, turn on the emergency flashers, and wait for help to come, even if you have to wait all night. It's better to be in the safety of your vehicle. The segment also featured a ride-along interview with California Highway Patrol officer Craig P.I., who emphasized the dangers of leaving your car and blindly trusting others. This broadcast concluded with an interview with a driver who ran out of gas. He had pulled over on the highway and sent out on foot to find a nearby gas station. The bottom line, though, is that preventing all this trouble is easy. Be sure your car works, and as simple as it sounds, be sure you've got gas, because even if you're lucky enough to get some, you still may be taking your life in your own hands. Do you realize how dangerous it is? Yes, I realize, in fact, I was putting the gas, and an 18-wheeler came by and almost blew me away. Truthfully. However, what seemed like an innocent public service announcement was in reality aired in response to a horrific crime that took place in San Diego just 2 days prior. The victim of this crime was Carrara, and a 20-year-old honors student at San Diego State University. She spent Christmas Day with her family celebrating the occasion and opening presents after dinner. She made plans to spend the next couple of days with her boyfriend, Wayne Bautista. Wayne had severe flu at the time, and Carol wanted to nurse him back to health, so she drove to his house and stayed there for the next 2 days on the 27th of December at around 8 p.m. She called her father Sam, not from her boyfriend's place, to let him know that she was on her way home. The drive from Wayne's house should have taken about 30 minutes, but when 2 hours passed with no sign of her, her parents began to worry at around 1 p.m. Sam suddenly got up from his chair and said to his wife, "I'm going to go find Carrara with that." He drove to Wayne's house hoping that Kara would still be there. Unfortunately, Wayne told him that she left soon after she called Sam, and he had no idea where she was, members of her family, and Wayne began looking for her along the route she should have taken back home. However, despite driving around all night, they found nothing that could give them any insight into her whereabouts. Kara had vanished without a trace. That is until 5:15 a.m. when the family decided to drive down the Mercy Road exit ramp off of I-15. There they found Kara's white Volkswagen Beetle. The driver's side window was halfway down. The keys were still in the ignition and all of her own belongings were still in the car, but there were no signs of Kara herself. The family reported this find to the police, who quickly began searching the area. Not long after this search began, they found Kara's lifeless body 70 feet below a nearby bridge. Later medical examination of her body revealed that she had rope burns around her neck and a mysterious round injury above one of her eyes. After a complete analysis of her injuries, the coroner concluded that she had been strangled before being thrown from the bridge. Other than these injuries, there were no signs of anything being done to Kara. This made it extremely difficult for investigators to pinpoint the killer's motive behind this horrific crime. There were no signs of someone else being in the car either, which also made it difficult to determine why she would drive off the main highway down an abandoned exit on her own. Kara's boyfriend was the last person who saw her alive. This made him the lead suspect in her murder, but he was soon cleared of any suspicion since he was at home recovering from the flu. When the crime happened, the only clue investigators had left was a receipt from a Chevron gas station about 15 miles from the crime scene Kara likely stopped. On June 2, 2016, a woman named Christina Kellen posted this video of her pet parrot talking. Like on most other occasions, people will look at a video like this, think it's cute or interesting, and move on with their lives. But in this case, the video of a talking parrot became the key to solving a murder, one that baffled investigators for over a year. On May 12, 2015, at around 7:30 a.m., a woman named Connie Ari heard gunshot sounds from her neighbor's house across the street in Sand Lake, Michigan, but she didn't pay much attention to it, since the neighbor, 46-year-old Marty Durham, regularly hunted in the area. Connie and her husband Keith were close friends with Marty and his wife Glenn, and were familiar with the couple's habits. However, later that day, Keith notified Connie and told her that Marty wasn't answering his phone calls or text messages. So after finishing her work, Connie went out to the Durham house to investigate. The doors were locked and no one answered when she knocked. She assumed the couple wasn't home and went back to her house, but when an entire day passed without any word from Marty or Glenn, Connie became concerned and decided to check on them again. This time she noticed that one of the doors was unlocked and went inside. At first, she found the living room, which was a complete mess. It looked like the place had just been robbed. However, nothing could have prepared Connie for what she came across next. As she entered the master bedroom, she saw both Marty and Glenn lying on the floor covered in blood. She immediately ran outside and called for help. A group of firefighters was already nearby and rushed to the scene. After taking note of the situation, the first responders pronounced that both Marty and Glenn were already dead. Both had bullet wounds on their bodies, and judging from the state of the rest of the house, it looked like a robbery gone wrong. But before they could begin investigating who the supposed robber was, something completely unexpected happened about an hour after the initial report. A police officer who was on the scene noticed that Glenn looked like she was breathing. He walked up to her to check for a pulse, and that's when she opened her eyes and sat up straight. Despite having a bullet wound behind her ear, she was taken to the hospital for treatment. Miraculously, her wound wasn't lethal, resulting in her surviving the incident. Marty, however, wasn't as fortunate. He was shot 5 different times and didn't make it back at their house. Investigators found a Ruger new model revolver under a couch in the living room. They also found several cartridges and 1 unused bullet for this revolver on the couple's bed. Investigators believed that this was the weapon used to shoot both Marty and Glenn, but they didn't find anything that could help them locate the supposed intruder without any other options. The police began investigating Marty and Glenn in hopes of finding potential leads. That's when they made a chilling discovery. Glenn's phone record showed that on May 11th, 2 days before Marty's body was discovered, she texted her mother saying, "Love, you was sorry." Seconds after sending this text, Glenn's phone accessed a web page titled Ruger New Model Single 6 Single Action Revolve. This was the same gun that was found in their home. After a more thorough search, investigators also found 3 letters written in Glenn's handwriting that were addressed to her children, similar to the text she sent to her mother. These letters also contained apologies of sorts. When Glenn finally recovered enough to talk in October of 2016, investigators asked about everything.